So I'm going to talk a little bit about the academic poster. Okay, and you might be wondering, why am I talking about the academic poster? I mean, it's the lowest of all the presentations we do, and yet it is probably one of the more important ones, because this is the first presentation you would be doing when you start off your research. Because almost always when you have a preliminary data, you're excited about something, your supervisors will probably turn to you and say, oh, there's a conference coming up, why don't you present it? Because you can put it in your CV, you can win prizes, and it's good for you when you go for your annual assessments. So for all those things, the poster is an important modality. But much more than that, the poster is basically a modality for you to show your special ideas, your special research findings, your special things you have found in your own research, for you to share with other people, for you to network, for you to get their views, for you to get further ideas, as well as for other people to take notice of you. So it is an important avenue for you to shine if you do it properly. Okay. The problem with posters is, most of the time when we go for poster sessions, the poster sessions are usually held at tea breaks, lunchtime, or after the main sessions are over. So everybody's tired. You're carrying around a cup of coffee, and you're walking around looking at various poster after poster. And what you'd see is this kind of walls of writing. Okay. Yeah, there's some color, that's interesting. And then you walk past another one, oh, that's more color, that's interesting as well. And after a while, you see, okay, I'm not really interested in all this. Oh, that's UCL. Maybe I should check it out. Oh my God, that's a gray wall. I'm not interested. So that's usually how it happens, because you're walking around with a cup of coffee and you're not really paying attention to what it is there, mainly because it is a wall of information where people try to, where the presenters are trying to give you too much information. And most of the time, you'd end up at most seeing maybe one or two posters in detail. One that catches your attention, what we usually call a unicorn poster, something interesting, something colorful, something in your area of interest, where the title is big enough for you to see, and that might stop you. And what you do is you probably end up the rest of the poster session in that one poster. So the issue is, how do you, as the presenter, become that person with the unicorn poster? That's the whole issue. Because what happens in most cases is, when you go to present a poster, if you have done it before, this is what you see. You'll be standing there next to your poster, and everybody is walking. And they're walking past you because they don't want to make any eye contact. Because they're worried, if they make an eye contact, they have to see your poster. They have to stop and they have to talk to you. They don't want to. So the people are just walking past, and it kind of deflates your enthusiasm when you see that. And that's why it is essential for you to find out what are the characteristics of a unicorn poster, the characteristics of a good, informative, clear poster, and how you can replicate it. So why do we come up with this? I showed you the various posters just now. A lot of them had so much information. They had lines and lines of gray text. So why do we come up with that? Let's go back one step. When you start your research and you develop a preliminary data, you'll write up your abstract. So this is the example of an abstract one of my students sent to me, right? It's a very interesting paper. We found some interesting findings. So the student sends this to me, and I say, that's very good. You've got a presentation coming up in 3 months. Why don't you put it up as a poster? And so my student sends this off to the conference, which gets accepted. And then the student completely forgets about it until about 2 weeks prior to the conference, at which point I have to remind her and say, oh, have you prepared the poster? And then the student will panic, will put up a PowerPoint, will open up a PowerPoint, and then will start transferring the whole abstract into the poster. And this is what will happen. You end up with a wall of text, which actually does not convey any adequate information. Of course, then you bounce back with your supervisors. You might end up with something like this. Again, lots of information, lots of demographic data, unnecessary data, data which is very tiny. You can't really pick up anything. The title is almost invisible. Remember, these posters are all being viewed at about anywhere from 6 to 8 feet away. When they walk past you, they're walking at 6 to 8 feet away. And you want the title to be very clear, because the one and only thing that catches the attention is usually the title. The title has to be much bigger, right? There cannot be so much of data which are so spread out that you don't really have any interest. Nothing is going to drag me into this poster, right? So why do we have posters like this? I mean, on the one on the left, I don't want to read this. There's just so much of gray data. There's too much of words. It's going to take me so much of time, as opposed to the one on your right. Okay, I might find that interesting. I might want to see what that is about, because there is, a lot of pictures. Maybe it's easier to read. There's one or two graphs. The conclusion is very clear. It'll take me less than a minute. This is the kind of poster I might actually stop at. And so how do we move from left to right? And that's what we're going to try to learn here today, right? We want to learn how to design a clear, beautiful, eye-catching poster, which will be noticed and remembered. And we want to look like a pro while we're doing it. At the same time, we also want to make valuable connections because of the poster. So these are the objectives of actually presenting a poster, because you want to get good feedback, you want to present and share your ideas, you want to get make connections as well with people who are doing work in the same field. Remember, at the end of the day, the poster is like a movie trailer. What you're showing is just a little bit of the exciting bits of your project. You're not showing the whole project. Don't try to cram the whole movie into that 5 minutes. All you're doing is show one or two of the important characters, what they might do, how exciting it is, just so that the reader gets drawn in, and he would later want to connect with you or even want to collaborate with you. And that's the whole point. Think of it as a trailer. So what makes a good poster? The information should always be readable, at least from about 10 feet away. The title must be short and must be very clear. Usual word count ranges from about 300 to 800 words. Anything more than that, it becomes an essay. The text must be clear and must be crisp. Preferably use as much bullets and numberings and headlines as you can. In fact, all your data, all your text should be in bullet points. When you use graphics and colors, which you must use, it must be effective and to the point. It mustn't be redundant graphics. You don't put a picture just because it looks nice. You put a picture because it conveys information. The layout must be consistent, it must be clean, and you must always include your name, your contact, as well as your institutional affiliation. It's very important, because at the end of the day, that is what the other people who are reading it are going to take back, and who are, when they want to collaborate or network with you, they will need that information. Before you start writing your poster, there are a few things you must establish. First is, who are you going to be speaking to? What kind of a conference is this? Is this a undergraduate level conference? Is this a general medical conference? Is this a general surgical conference? Or is this a very subspecialized hepatobiliary, colorectal, vascular, very specialized conference? Because your poster must be pitched to the level of your audience. It cannot be a general poster you use in the same undergraduate as in the subspecialty hepatobiliary or vascular conference, because then you're going to miss that audience. Okay. Similarly, you must also be very clear about what is the most important and interesting finding from your research project. Try to stick to one. You don't need to give everything. Like I said, it's just a trailer. You're just reeling them in. So you just have to give them one, probably the most important finding. Okay. And similarly, you must have at least one or two figures or charts that would convey the result at a glance, that would not need extra text. So whatever charts you put in there, it must be clear enough on its own that you don't have to write it down again in the text. There must always be a take-home message or a clear conclusion, which is easily understandable, which clarifies what your findings was. And you must also always remember what further information you have to do to convey verbally, because even though it's a poster, frequently you're expected, if it's a in the olden days, olden days, about 3-4 years ago, we used to have to stand next to the poster during the poster time and explain it. Of course, now it's almost always virtual, but even then they expect you to give a very brief overview and answer questions. So you do need to know what further information you have to have prior to presenting the poster. So these are information you must have already collected before you start. This is an overview of creating an academic poster. So there are 7 steps to it. The first is planning. Second is audience awareness. Third is the layout. Fourth is the design. Fifth is images. Sixth is the text. Is final check. This is not about the content, but present. Okay. So let's move one by one. Planning. You must, as I mentioned many times before, the purpose of a poster is to display graphically the main points of your work. And you would want to, every poster should not have more than one, maximum 2 points. Even 2 points is too much. You just want to convey 1 point, 1 outcome, 1 finding. That's all you want to do in a poster. And you must always be very clear about what is the information that must be given, what should be given, and what is nice to know, can be given, but maybe you don't need it. Because that's how you decide whether you want to eliminate the information if there's too much. You must keep the must. You can add the should. You don't necessarily have to have the nice to know. Okay. Again and again, I've mentioned this. Don't try to include everything. You only need to put in one information or one objective or outcome. Because if you cut and paste, you just waste your audience. The audience are not going to pay attention. Nobody is going to benefit from this. Okay. And you must have nice, relevant graphics which are self-explanatory. Okay. And don't focus on the minor details. You have to look at the poster as an overall bigger picture where you're trying to convey your findings and your information. Next, we'll move on to the audience awareness. So as I mentioned, you must know who your audience are, expertise level. If their expertise level is very high, then you have to pitch the poster at a higher level. You don't have to give too much introduction. You don't have to give too much of overview, because the audience already knows that. You can straight jump into the methodology, the problems, as well as the solutions you're proposing. And similarly, you must know their knowledge gap. What do they already know? What is new to them? And why do you want to teach them? So there must be the concept and the terminology, all of which depends on the audience you're pitching for. Next is the layout. So when we talk about layout of posters, there are 2 main layouts. One is the horizontal, which is this way, going straight. The other one is vertical, going upwards, this one. So there are 2 types of layouts, horizontal or vertical. And each layout is then divided into various columns and rows. So on average, you would have anywhere from 2 to 4 columns. But I would probably recommend 3 columns, because that is usually the best compromise in most of these cases. And then it gives you enough space for you to put in the information, as well as your graphical displays you want to put, graphical images you want to put in. So the standard recommendation will be 3 columns. And whether you want to do it horizontal or vertical depends on what information you want to put up, as well as your guidelines from your conference meeting itself. There are 2 ways you can actually put your information layout. The standard one is the IMRAD format, which is introduction, methods, results, discussion, conclusion, and references. Remember, posters don't have abstracts. The information is already small enough. You do not need to put an abstract on top of that. So you can go straight into the introduction and go down, this is the standard method in most cases, the IMRAD. However, there are other innovative ways you can present your information. It's a problem solution format. You define the problem and then you define possible solutions You choose one solution as your methodology. You show them what the result of the solution was. This is especially useful when you're doing it, pitching to an expert group who already know the background very well. So they already know what the problem is, and they'd be more invested in finding out what are the possible solutions you're suggesting. Okay, so the problem solution format is very good, especially in subspecialized medicine, if you're going to do it. Always remember, when people read, they read the conventional way of reading is from top to bottom and from left to right. That is the conventional way of reading, and that's how you should also lay out the format of your reading. So whenever you're doing something, try to make it flow top to bottom. So introduction up here, followed by methods down here, followed by results, followed by discussion, etc. So that way there is a sort of a flow which is conventional. What about designs? There are so many softwares available. The common, I mean, almost everybody uses PowerPoint, but there are so many others, including Adobe, as well as Scribus. You also have got multiple open source alternatives like Inkscape, GIMP, as well as OpenOffice Impress. So these are all available softwares you can use. Of course, if you want to be safe, just stick to PowerPoint, which is good enough. PowerPoint gives you almost everything you want to create a good poster. The other thing to remember is, please do remember that what you see in your computer when you're preparing your poster is not necessarily what will come out as a printed image, because the printed image is usually about anywhere from 5 to 10 times bigger than what you see in your computer. And because of that, there will be scaling and resolution problems. There will be pixelation of your images, etc. So be careful about that. And usually it's best to start by setting the size of the page in your PowerPoint or whatever software you're using when you start the project. Try to have a split of about 60 to 40 between graphics and text. That means about 60% of your poster should be graphics, images, graphics, charts, etc. And 40% should be text. And you should have enough empty space between all this information. The color schemes, I will talk about the color schemes later. The last thing about design is background. In scientific academic posters, backgrounds actually are not a very helpful adjunct. In fact, what they do is they are gimmicky, they are colorful, and they take away from your message you're trying to send. So the best thing is to have a plain background. Don't have pictures of surgical fields or tumors and etc. Obscuring your text and your important results. It's not necessary here. We are not doing infographics or anything like that. You're doing an academic poster. What about images? I spoke a little bit about this earlier, about the fact that pixelation and resolution may differ, especially when you blow it up. So be very careful about that. Try to get the largest pixelation possible, at least 200 to 300 pixels per inch if you can. And when you print it as well, try to print it in high resolution. When you put up graphs and charts, please be very clear. The lines must be thicker, the axis must be labeled, and they must be labeled horizontal. Don't label them vertically, because when somebody is reading a poster, they don't want to turn their head around to see the vertical labels. So label everything horizontal. If you do have any graphs, don't have any additional legends. Label the graphs, the charts on the chart itself. So what I mean is, if you have a chart here, label it here. You don't have an additional legend at the side. Try to avoid these grid lines. Try to avoid a background which is gray. You want a simple background. You want the labels on this chart itself. And you want to have a clear title for the chart. There are various different types of charts you can use. You can use pie charts, bar charts, graph charts. You can even use colorful pictures, pyramids, and spider charts and things like that, because they are all quite interesting. The more interesting chart you use, the more you'll get people to walk to your poster. However, don't overcomplicate things. Using things like 3D charts, they are actually not very good. because they obscure the results you're trying to present, and they don't really help this convey the message clearly. So try not to use that. This was actually a list of charts and tables which was given to a group of judges, and they were asked to vote on what was the most interesting and information dense chart they liked. And if you go from left to right, the left was the least liked charts. So you can obviously see these are the ones they don't like. There's too much information here. They're not very clear, as opposed to the colorful charts here. These were the most liked and the most highly marked. So these are the kind of charts most judges in the poster sections prefer. And this is what you want to try to achieve. What about text? The text must always be, there must be a hierarchy of text, number one. When I say hierarchy of text, that means the title must always be the largest font, followed by your subheadings, your headings, introduction, method, etc. That must be the second largest. Your subheading must be the third largest, and your text must be the fourth largest. There must be a hierarchy which says what is the importance of the text. And that's why it is important. You must try to use as large as possible. So for a title, you can use anything from 60 to 72. For a text, you must use anything from 30 to 40 size. You must always try to align the text left to right, because that's the conventional Western way of reading, and try to use bullet points as much as you can. When it comes to font, it's best to use sans serif fonts. Sans serif includes Helvetica, Calibri, etc. as opposed to serif fonts, which are Times New Roman, because they don't read very well, because they have got a lot of this additional lines that jut out. They actually, in a text dense poster, they'll get hidden, and they make it seem very drab and gray. So as much as possible, try to avoid serif fonts. Stick with sans serif fonts. You can see the difference here. So this is a serif font. You have all these additional things, as opposed to the other ones which don't have. The other thing is, don't try to use all capital letters, except maybe in the title. You should not use, because that's almost equivalent to being very loud or being rude. So you don't want to put too much of capital letters. You must mix capital with lowercase letters. What about the color scheme? Color scheme, try to stick to something not more than 3 colors plus black in one poster. Anything more than that is too much color. And when you choose the color scheme, try to stick to, this is the color wheel. When you see the color wheel, what you can do is you choose 3 adjacent colors, because they usually go well together. So if you're choosing blue, blue, green, and green, they go well together. Similarly, you can choose yellow, green, yellow, and orange, something like that. So the color scheme, as long as you choose 3 adjacent colors, they usually go well together. If you want a contrast, then you go to the opposite of your color scheme. So blue contrasts well with orange. Similarly, yellow contrasts well with violet. So that's how you choose your contrast. But then don't do too many contrasts. I mean, you want to keep it to a minimum, these contrast colors. And again, I want to emphasize, try to keep your color schemes to 3 or less. What about adjuncts? One of the new adjuncts that is very useful, which I have found very useful particularly, is the QR code. It captures a wider audience, because when they're walking past, they can just take a snapshot. Any of the visitors can take a snapshot and look at your poster later. They can even share your poster. So it even makes it available even after they go back to their own institutions or their own places, and they can share it. You can also leave your contact information in the QR code. And it's very, very easy to do a QR code now. You just go to any of the QR code generators. If you go to Google and put in QR code generator, you've got a lot of free QR code generators. So like this one is a QR code generator for my research portfolio. And it's relatively easy to make. And you should, I would strongly encourage that you use this as an adjunct for all your posters. You create a QR code based on your poster, and have it in the poster itself, so anybody can take it. Similarly, previously what we used to do is we used to give handouts, A4 size printed material. but that is a waste of paper, and and most of the time they do take it and then they misplace it, and which means it's not really as useful as a QR code. So I would probably strongly suggest that you add a QR code for all your poster presentations. And finally, the final checks. Always make sure you do a fact check. You must make sure your arguments and your claims and your statistics are very clear. Your references are good. You must make sure. Oh, whoa. You must make sure you
Mute yourself, please.
yeah, you must make sure you proofread it at least twice, and preferably by two different people, because you really don't want to go to an international conference with spell check mistakes, which actually will make it very, very embarrassing. So preferably you don't want you want at least two proofreadings. Of course, if you're going to do a physical poster, then you want to print test it early enough, and then you want to save it in multiple spots, including the cloud if possible. So these are the final checks you do before you submit your poster. Let's go through one or two examples of good and bad posters. So this is an example of a really poor poster. What you can see here is a wall of green with lots of information. I mean, obviously it's an important poster on breast cancer and tamoxifen resistance and things like that, but there's just too much going on in here. Nobody's going to pay attention. If you look at it, there is an abstract there. The text is just one intimidating wall. There's just too many graphs which are so small, and the labels are very tiny. The captions are not aligned. Everything is very cramped. So nobody's going to read something like this. What you want rather is something a bit more spaced out like this. You want a nice big title. You want the flow to be clear. If you look here, the methodology is actually graphic. So a graphic abstract, graphic methodology is much better than a written textual methodology. And this is, you don't have to put everything, you just have to put the most key points of your methodology here. So again, the methodology is very clear. And then the results. Again, the results are not in textual form, it's rather in graphical form. And there's not, I mean, the results should be self-explanatory in most of these posters, because you're just trying to send one information. And finally, there's conclusions and future directions. This is how a simple poster should be, very clear. This is one I would stop and read, because it won't take too much of my time. And as I mentioned, there's a QR code. If I really am interested, I can just take a snapshot of the QR code and move on to the next poster. This is not too bad either, the poster on your right hand side, because the writing, I mean, it is not too tight, but there is still a lot of words here. I would be a little bit more worried about sitting down and looking at this. And there's a lot of unnecessary graphics here, I feel. Like this last one at the right bottom here, I don't really think it's really necessary. However, what I like about this is the fact that they've got a primary takeaway. So let's say I'm in a rush, I read the title, I like it, I will just take home the primary takeaway and maybe the contact for the person who's involved. So that's all I need here. Okay. Remember earlier I said one of my RAs prepared a PowerPoint presentation for a poster, and this is what we ended up with, which is really not the most interesting poster. So after multiple iterations and corrections, this is where we ended up with. So we've got a clearer title, which is bigger, and it talks about the usage and impact of survival. So anybody who's interested in something like this will stop and watch. Okay, the introduction is very clear. It's bullet points. It's not crowded. I've got a very simple chart, which instead of the larger demographic chart, I've got a simple chart telling the most important points I wanted to bring up here. I've got the results here very clearly with a nice yellow background, which tells with the labels inside the graphs itself, which tells the most important bit. So if you look at the poster, the central part of the poster is this survival function. And that's what I'm trying to lead everybody to see. And that's why it's important. And finally, I've got my conclusions here highlighted. So because of all this, I am assuming somebody who's going to read this is going to be more interested. Of course, I've got my QR code right at the top here. If they don't have the time, they can just take a picture snapshot of this and move on. So finally, this is my final slide, how to make your poster better. Follow the instructions. Prepare early. Concentrate on one objective and one outcome. Simplify, simplify, and simplify again. If you got text, cut it down to as minimum as possible. Every sentence must mean something. Get a great title, because that is probably the only thing most people see in a poster. And leave space, lots of space if you can. Be very consistent about your font, colors, width, labels, etc. Always remember, bigger is always better. Bigger text, bigger pictures, a lot more white space will be much better for you in your poster presentation. Thank you.